Hi, everyone. Welcome to the National Small Business Week Virtual Summit hosted by the U.S. Small Business Administration and SCORE. I'd like to thank Grow with Google for sponsoring this webinar, Make Your Small Business More Accessible. My name is Taylor Hedgepeth with SCORE, and I will be the moderator for this webinar session. I'm excited to introduce you to our speaker today, Anastasia Kudrez, who is the lead educator for the Grow with Google program. She's been speaking for Google since 2005, appearing at hundreds of events on Google's behalf and training thousands of people across the world. Before we begin this presentation, I would like to mention just a few housekeeping items. This webinar will last approximately 1 hour, and you will have the ability to download the slide deck on the bottom of the webcast console by clicking the handout icons. If you have any questions at all or any technical issues, please submit those using the Q&A box. All right, I would like to now bring Anastasia on the line to begin her presentation.
Hello, everybody. How y'all doing out there? Welcome to today's presentation, which is titled Make Your Small Business More Accessible. I'm Stasia, the lead educator for Grow with Google, and on behalf of the team, I'd like to thank you all for attending today. Before we get started, I want to let you know that we will have a presentation followed by Q&A. If you have questions that you'd like to submit during our presentation, please leave them in the chat and we will answer them after I'm done presenting. So today we're going to be talking about why taking steps to be inclusive is so important to your business. We're going to go over best practices for making digital communications and physical stores more accessible to all of your customers. Let's expand to the next slide. Okay. So let me go here to the next slide. There you go. To understand accessibility, you first need to understand the challenges that people with disabilities often face in their daily lives. So some disabilities are visible, others are not immediately apparent, but someone with any type of impairment may encounter barriers to completing certain tasks or activities. Accessibility ensures that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the products, the services, and the tools that are available to anyone else. Often this can be done with the help of assistive technologies that break down those barriers. Here we go. The World Health Organization estimates that over 1 billion people worldwide live with some form of disability. That's 15% of the world's population and 1 in 4 adults in the United States. That means that over 25% of your potential customers in the US have a disability. Another thing to think about, if you or your customers don't have a disability now, you might in the future. It could be temporary, like an injury that requires that you use crutches, or something more permanent. Globally, people with disabilities have over $6 trillion in spending power. And so if your business isn't thoughtful about how it's going to connect and communicate with these potential customers, you're missing out on a large group of people with significant resources. And that's where we get to building for accessibility. Building for accessibility means producing digital content that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with. It's about designing your business communications, products, and your physical space in ways that allow people with disabilities to engage. People can't buy your products and services if they can't understand and engage with them. So building for accessibility is good for business since it expands your market. And a bonus, these tactics often improve the experience for all users. So how would it do that? Let's imagine that we're watching a football game. I'd watch a basketball game. Let's watch a football game on TV in a noisy bar. To improve the experience for people with disabilities, the bar owner might enable closed captions on the television screen. Closed captions help people with hearing impairments access the game commentary and access the content on that TV. But in a noisy bar, closed captions can help everybody, whether you have a hearing impairment or not. So you'll see that many of the strategies that we're going to review today benefit all users. And it's important to note that implementing these strategies can help you comply with rules and laws, lessening your company's legal risk. I just mentioned captions in a sports bar, and that's certainly a good starting example, but I want to show you more examples. Tools that allow people with disabilities to participate in activities that might otherwise be closed to them are called assistive technologies. They include things like Braille, enlarged fonts, and hearing aids. In this presentation, I will show you other examples of assistive technologies that you may find included in software programs. I'll start by showing you a voice recording feature. This one is built into Google Docs. So let's take a quick demo. So you are all looking at an example of a Google Doc. And I put some preliminary text on here that you can see in the document. But I'm going to show you one demo right now, which is the ability to actually type with your voice. So what I will do is I will go to Tools, and then I will go to Voice Typing. And then I will click on this microphone, and then I'm going to read. So watch what happens on the document. Hi, everyone. Welcome to National Small Business Week, where we celebrate the spirit of small business in the United States with many educational sessions, helping share best practices for small businesses. And then I click on the microphone to stop. So then you can go in and you can edit them as well, but that's one way an example of assistive technology at work. Now there's also the ability to use technology to actually read things aloud to you if you're a person with a vision impairment. There are a few steps to do that, and there's no one right way to do this. The example that I'm going to show you here is using an extension, a free extension that is part of Chrome. So I'm going to go in and enable it. It's also, I think, really good because it's going to give you some insight into what it's like to be using a screen reader. So I'm going to turn this on.
Chrome Vox spoken feedback is ready. Demo, Google Docs tab, document content, text box.
So now I'm back at my document, and you can hear the screen reader technology telling the person what's actually happening on the computer. So here's an example of how it would work. If I wanted to read this document, I could highlight it.
Selected.
Then I would go to Accessibility.
Accessibility, menu expanded with submenu.
And I would click on Speak Selection.
Hi everyone, welcome to National Small Business Week, where we celebrate the spirit of small business in the United States with many educational sessions helping share best practices for small businesses. Hi everyone, welcome to National Small Business Week, where we celebrate the spirit of small business in the United States with many educational sessions helping share best practices for small businesses. Document content, text box.
All right, and that is an example of how assistive technology works. I'm going to go in and turn off the screen reader.
Tab.
There we go. But that gives you a demonstration of how this technology actually would work. All right, let's keep going. There are so many things that we can do to make existing digital content more accessible to those with disabilities. So let's take a closer look at universal design. Universal design means designing for everyone, whether they have disabilities or not. Universal design can help those with and without disabilities better comprehend digital content. It includes many different techniques to help people comprehend that content, like image descriptions and alt text and color contrast, design techniques, formatting, and video captions and transcripts. Let's explore some of these examples in the next section of the presentation. Oops, go back one. Here we are. All right. Juggling a few screens. All right, so take a look at this image. We're going to talk about adding alternative text, and I'm going to have you try an activity. Adding alternative text for images is a key principle for web accessibility. It's also one of the most difficult to properly implement. So let's start with this exercise. How would you all out there describe this image? It's coffee, right? But what else is it? Specifically, it is a white ceramic cup filled with black coffee on a saucer with a spoon. But if we're talking about alt text, context is key. You should ask yourself what the meaning of this image is supposed to convey to the person looking at this page or reviewing this page. So what is the reason that you would include that level of detail in the description? Alternative text should represent the content in context and function of the image. The key principle here is that computers and screen readers cannot analyze an image and determine what that image presents and represents. Alternative text can be presented in two ways. You can add it within the alt attribute, some people call it the alt tag, but it's the alt attribute of the image element, or within the context or surroundings of the image itself. So let's go back to that image of the coffee. Consider why it's on this web page. If its purpose is to help the user make a menu selection, like coffee, the alt text might simply be coffee. If the purpose of the image is to show a piece of art, the alt text might be acrylic painting of a cup of coffee. But if the purpose of this image was to be purely decorative, not adding any content or function, then your alt text might actually be blank. This is a really big topic to unpack. And so I'm going to refer you to a resource article about using alternative text. It's on a website called webaim.org. WebAIM stands for Web Accessibility in Mind. It's a nonprofit organization based at the Institute for Disability Research, Policy, and Practice at Utah State University. Their URL is also going to be listed in the resources section at the end of today's presentation. All right. When you add an image into your website, you have two distinct ways for visitors to understand it, the alt text and the descriptions. Now, some of you out there might call descriptions captions. I'm old school, and so that's how I refer to them. Alt text is an abbreviation for alternative text, and it's sort of a behind-the-scenes label for an image on a website. Though it cannot be seen on the web page, it is picked up by screen readers. That means that a visually impaired person using a screen reader will hear the alt text description of the image read aloud and give them a fuller understanding of the information on that page. Alt text also helps search engines properly categorize the content of websites, which potentially improves the site's SEO. Alt text is separate from the descriptions or captions. Descriptions are visible. They appear on the page with the image. Without descriptions or alt text, a screen reader will miss that the image is actually a part of the content. Let's talk about using images in your communications. As I mentioned, an unlabeled image will not be seen by a screen reader. The same is true for charts and graphs. Alt text should be added to charts and graphs, offering a short description of the graph or chart for the screen reader. In this particular case, there should also be a second description, a long description. This can either be a caption or description, or a link to a separate web page that has a detailed description. This is especially important for charts that have complex information. So the description on this slide, or the caption, says, with the addition of 5 new training spaces over the course of the last year, we are now able to accommodate more people. So the description is helpful, but it could go even further. Here's a more detailed, informative caption. The number of waitlisted students begins in Q4 2016 as over 80 and steadily drops to less than 40 by Q4 2017. The number of students classified as enrolled and attended rose over the same period of time, reaching over 80 and 60 respectively. So in that caption, second version, we've highlighted the key points of that chart or graph to the reader, and then they can examine the graph more closely with greater insights. So think of your audience to determine what level of detail is required to understand that caption, for the caption to help them understand that graph. It's also helpful to provide data in an alternative format like a spreadsheet, since assistive technology can sort, view, and parse tabular data. You can use the website coding to connect the descriptions with the associated images or charts so that the screen reader can understand the relationship between the information. You can use the website coding to connect these descriptions with the associated image so the screen reader can connect that info. If you want a tutorial, visit the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C. Their website is at www.w3.org and search for complex images. Incidentally, the W3C has an initiative that's called WAI, Web Accessibility Initiative, and it's dedicated to promoting a high degree of usability for people with disabilities. Okay, let's talk about our next topic, color and contrast. This is another important tool for making your content accessible. People with visual disabilities can see darker colors more clearly than lighter colors, generally speaking. But it's not just the colors. It's making color choices for your content. It's important to consider the contrast between the background and the text. The color should be dissimilar enough so that the text pops and that it's readable. Here we can see how contrast can affect readability. In the example on the left, colors have low contrast, which make the letters softer and muddier. If you compare that to the higher contrast combination on the right, you can see how the letters stand out more sharply, which increase readability. You can see lots more about design standards for color contrast for regular sized and large font at the W3C's site. That's located under the section called Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. While color is a powerful tool, relying only on color to indicate distinctions may leave behind the 30 million people who have color blindness. As an example, consider a traffic map that shows clogged routes in red and roads with good traffic flow in green. If someone can't distinguish between red and green, how are they going to know which route has less traffic? There are some design techniques that can help make it easier for people. First, think of color in terms of high contrast. Hue, which is light versus dark. Saturation, which is the intensity of the color. And brightness. When you can, use thick lines. You can also try using patterns of dashed lines to differentiate content on the page. Now, don't assume that color conveys a specific meaning. You can use textures to distinguish objects and add patterns or labels to ensure that you've got contrast in charts. And finally, don't forget to label elements like your titles, your legends, and your X and your Y axes. Here are some examples of these design techniques. You can get a sense of how high contrast, hue, saturation, and brightness works by translating this color chart into a grayscale format. See how the color and the stronger hues in the color chart correlate to the stronger grays? Remember that using contrast in colors can make the letters and the numbers pop. In the graph on the right, you see how the different design elements that we talked about improve readability. We're using thicker lines. We have dashed lines in various patterns, and we've labeled the elements like the legends, the titles, and the X and Y axes as well. If you've ever scanned the headlines and subheadlines of an article or instruction book to quickly find what you're looking for, then you will probably know how useful those bits of text can be. Assistive technologies allow readers to scan a document in this way too, by creating a list of all of the headers. This list is generated based on the way that your document is formatted. In this example, which is using Google Docs, the built-in text formatting tools organizes the headings within a document for all readers, from the largest text, which is labeled H1, to the smallest text, H6. Google Docs creates a document outline based on your header choices, while the assistive technology will gather these elements into heading lists. And this is very similar in Microsoft Word. In this example, the Chromebox screen reader has organized the headings into a list that allows the user to hear the headings in order. WebAIM surveyed screen reader users in 2019. Nearly 70% of the people polled said that they navigate content via headings just like these. So correctly implementing these headers will make a significant difference for people with disabilities. Now, let's take a look at formatting text links. Well-written text links set the user's expectations about where the link will take them if they click on it. Take the first example. Visit the National Small Business Week homepage for an overview of events. When I see the link on the text, National Small Business Week homepage, I assume that if I click this link, I will be taken to a homepage that discusses National Small Business Week. But if I linked only the words "this link," it doesn't give me a clear idea of where I will land on that website. Just as a screen reader users can navigate a page by the headings, they can also jump to all of the links within a page via a link listing. And so if the link is not descriptive, it can create confusion and make your site, your document, or presentation difficult to navigate for screen reader users. Remember we discussed using closed caption on that I'd watch basketball game on TV in that noisy bar back earlier in the presentation? Well, that's not the only use for closed captioning. If you use videos for your business, perhaps on your website, you can add them here too. Captions and transcripts increase accessibility, and there are a few ways to create them. You can use automatic captioning. You can use automatic transcripts. You could create your own captions, or you could actually hire a vendor to create those captions for you. So in the chat box that you can see, think about one way that you may have relied on closed captioning or benefited by closed captioning for everyone, whether you're a person with a visual impairment or not. And for me, I can think of those situations personally, just like our example, where I've been in a restaurant or bar or someplace that's loud, and I was not able to hear the television, and that really helped me as a person who can hear, understand and comprehend that content. So that's an example of how assistive technologies and universal design helps everybody, not just people who may have some sort of disability. So take a minute and think about how it may have helped you. Let's take a look at the way automatic captioning works on different platforms. We'll start with YouTube. YouTube can use speech recognition technology to automatically create captions for most videos. Those captions are published with the video. Automatic captions are available in English, Dutch, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Korean, Portuguese, Russian, and Spanish. And auto-translate is also available in the settings for even more language. So that's pretty easy, right? But it's important to note that while auto captions are a good start for making video content more accessible, they're not a perfect substitute for human-created captions. So you actually have the ability to go in there and edit or upload your own captions as well. You can learn more about that in the YouTube Help Center if you do a search for the article titled YouTube Subtitles and Captions. So that's one platform. Another popular platform called Vimeo will actually allow users to toggle their auto captioning tool on and off while an event is live. So here's another example of making content more accessible. How many of you out there have ever watched a TED Talk? If you've ever watched a TED Talk online, you may have also noticed a speech bubble icon that's on the video player. If you click on this, it opens a window which allows you to select a language for subtitles, which will then play when you return to your video. And you can learn more about that on the TED Talk website. All right, I admit I don't. But if you do use TikTok, that's another example of a platform that has assistive technology built in. It has auto captions, a feature that automatically generates captions for videos that have sound or voices. And the creators of these TikTok videos have the option to toggle this feature on and off. So if you do use TikTok, you can make your videos more accessible for everyone by enabling this feature for your videos. And some platforms also offer video transcripts. In YouTube, you can view an automatic transcript with or without timestamps. Transcripts can also be uploaded to create the video captions. Here's a quick tip. For YouTube, you can ensure that all of your video caption text is accurate by starting with the automatic transcript, and then you can edit if necessary and then upload. So that can save you some time creating your video caption text. And you can learn more about how to do that again in the YouTube Help Center by searching for the section titled Add Subtitles and Captions. All right, next topic, PDFs. So PDF documents often require more thought and effort to be made accessible. Complex PDFs with images and diagrams are generally not accessible through assistive technology. But even text-only PDFs can be difficult for assistive technology to interpret. So if you do use PDFs, use the tagging and remediation software that is provided by Adobe to add accessibility to your document. And you can learn more about that at Adobe's website. Their accessibility information is at www.adobe.com/accessibility. All right, next topic. Let's talk about how you can make your email communications accessible next. There are a number of clear best practices to use in any email campaign to ensure that it is accessible to all. Think about these steps when you are creating your email. The text should be arranged in a logical order for readability. Screen readers and other commonly used assistive technology scan text from left to right and top to bottom. So with that in mind, keep text in a single column. One column layouts streamline content and help reinforce how the text is read. Sticking with this simple format also lessens the likelihood of sensory overload and confusion for users. Make the purpose of hyperlinked text clear. Avoid calls to action like learn more or get started and click here because they're too vague. You should also avoid emojis. I know we all love our emojis, but avoid emojis in your email subject line and when you are conveying critical information because they can be difficult for users who are visually impaired to interpret. Also, different operating systems may translate emojis differently while using a screen reader, and this can result in a misunderstanding of critical information. Here's another tip. Maintain a 60 to 40 text to image ratio. Too much text or too many images can make navigation difficult. You should avoid overusing links. Even if they're clearly labeled, if you have too many hyperlinks, it can lead to a poor reading experience. You want to maintain a minimum 14-point font size in your email body. Anything smaller can be difficult to read. Footers, disclaimers, terms of conditions, things like that can be smaller text. Remember, you want to maintain good contrast ratios and avoid visual cues that are based on color. Remember, 300 million people experience color blindness. So if you underline or bold hyperlinked text instead of color coding it, it will be more accessible. And if your email includes a video, be sure to include closed captioning, especially if the video includes critical information or instructions. If you want to learn more about any of these suggestions, check out the W3C's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So far, we've focused on accessibility considerations for online. So let's switch gears for a moment and talk about accessibility in your physical business space. Take a moment and think about your business's physical space and assess it with all potential customers in mind. Think about the noise level. What is the noise level? Can you make adjustments for people who have hearing impairments? Think about obstacles. Is the space easy to navigate, particularly for people who have visual or motor impairments, like wheelchair users? Think about your access. Is there an elevator? Is there a wheelchair accessible entrance and a parking lot that has spots dedicated for people who may have disabilities? Think about regulations. Do your counters and your doorways comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA regulations? And then take one more step. In online listings and on your website, include applicable information to help people know what to expect. Do you welcome service animals? Are you ADA compliant? Does the building have a wheelchair accessible entrance? Let potential new customers know how your business meets their needs. I'm actually going to interject just a small anecdote. I recently took a tour of an aviary in Radnor Park that's close to Nashville, Tennessee, where I live. And one of the most impressive parts about the aviary is that it was really built with people with disabilities in mind. For example, when you go to look at the birds, the windows are larger and lower. So if you were in a wheelchair, you would have a clear line of sight. And I know that the planners who created this aviary actually really made a very conscious, mindful effort to make sure that all of the experience was available and accessible to everyone, to every visitor who came. And so that's the kind of mindset that you want to approach, whether you're, optimizing for your physical store or for a place where people are going to visit, and for your online content as well. In the end, accessibility is really about respecting the needs of others and understanding the challenges that they may face. So I want to close the session by offering a few thoughts on what it means to be inclusive when you interact with somebody who may have disabilities. First of all, don't make assumptions. Many disabilities are invisible or hidden, including some physical disabilities or mental health conditions. Make sure that you speak normally. Avoid over-enunciating or slowing your speech or speaking loudly unless you are specifically asked to do so. And it is okay to use pleasantries like "see you later," even if you meet a person who has a visual impairment. Another good rule of thumb, true for everything, if you're not sure, ask. You want to ask before offering people help, offering assistance. The person may refuse the offer, that's okay, but you want to ask first. You're trying to respect an individual person's requests and their personal space. For example, someone may ask you to write directions because they prefer them to verbal instructions. So whenever you can, accommodate the requests like this as you're available to. And if a person uses a wheelchair or crutches or a cane, treat those items as part of their personal space and respect that. And that's a wrap. Thank you so very much for tuning into today's presentation. It's a big topic with lots of considerations, and we hope that you discovered some new ways to help make your small business more accessible for people with disabilities. As I mentioned, we are going to be including a series of, or a set of resources here at the last slide of the presentation, where you can go and learn more about different resources and tools that can help make your online content more accessible for everyone. Thank you so very much for allowing me to speak at today's presentation. I hope you guys have a great conference. Thank you so much.
Hello, all right, everyone. Hi, thank you. So we will now start the Q&A portion of our call, and we'll address as many questions as possible in the time remaining. So we got a lot of good questions come in. Jared asked, how does assistive technology and content work in social media? And they put an example such as hashtags.
I'm going to send that one straight over to Peter, actually.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pete Schumacher. I'm a program manager for accessibility at Google. So I'll be happy to answer this. This is a really great question. So a lot of the social media is going to be text, and that generally works very well. But there's a lot of things that you can do to improve the experience. The AFB actually recommends that when you do use hashtags, that you capitalize the first letter of each word. That'll help not only with individuals with low vision, individuals with some other visual disability, but it'll also help the screen reader users as well too. And so when you do have a hashtag, try to capitalize the beginning of each letter. In addition to that too, a lot of the social media platforms allow you to use alt text. So they do have that option for you to be able to go in and say, okay, I want to add this photo and I want to add an alt text that gives a description to it so my users who use screen readers can fully understand and see it and understand what's going on with the alt text. In addition to that too, a lot of, you'll notice when you browse social media, a lot of companies have started to add an image or a video, and then in a comment on their own post, they'll add another description. They'll say this is showing or this is appearing. And so that's another way to be helpful, and including some of the best practices we just went over, ensuring your videos have closed captioning and ensuring that you are making sure that you are not using colors to convey critical information. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Peter. We have another question that came in from Bridget. They said, is there a limit on how many characters you can use in the alt text field?
Ooh, again, I'm going to punt that to Peter.
Sure. So there isn't a limit, but there is a recommended sort of window. A lot of people online really recommend, and it kind of varies depending on person's preferences, but they do recommend around 100, below 100 characters. Some people say below 125 characters. But the most important thing to keep in mind is that you don't want to have alt text to be too verbose and too long and overly descriptive. You want to make sure, as we covered in the training, that you cover what's critical about that image, and that conveys to the user what that image is. Keep in mind, people who have screen readers enabled are going to be navigating and hearing a lot of content, and you just don't want to overwhelm people with so much verbosity and so much language. And so if we can be as descriptive yet short as possible, that's really the goal.
Okay, awesome. And we have another question from Haley. They said, how can video caption bloopers and misspelled words / names be corrected most efficiently?
Well, if you upload the video to YouTube, you actually have the ability to go in through this feature called YouTube Studio. And YouTube Studio has a lot of things. It allows you to brand your channel and view analytics. But in one of the other features, you have the ability to go in and upload your own captions, including correcting an auto transcript of your captions. So, for example, if you filmed the video and you're like, oops, that didn't come out the way I meant to say it, you can actually go to YouTube Studio, go in, you can actually download it, make that one correction of that word or a phrase, and then re-upload it. So that's one easy way to do it. Now, of course, I'm here from Google, so I can talk about YouTube, but you would need to explore the options for the other platforms as well. Unless, Peter, you know about some of the other, how Vimeo or TEDx or any of those others do it. I only know about YouTube.
Same here.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We have another question from Barbara. They said, thank you so much for this wonderful, insightful presentation. Does the voice text come in other languages other than English?
Heck yeah, it comes in a ton of languages. So I sent an answer to her in the text from the Google Help Center, and were there 65 languages in there, Pete? At least there were a lot. Yeah. So the short answer is yes, they do come in different languages. I saw another question earlier that was, what was that? What was that software that we were talking about? So if you go to the Chrome store, it's free. It's an extension that you add into your Chrome browser. If you do a search for screen reader, the one that turned up for me it's called Chrome Vox or just screen reader. That is the one that I demonstrated in today's session. But there are other options out there for you as well. I just showed you the one that I had from Google.
Okay, awesome. And Linda asked a question. They said, do you have examples you could share for email accessibility, specifically an example of a newsletter?
I don't, but where I would look for that, unless Pete has one in his pocket, my two favorite websites that I would look at for reference. First of all, I really love WebAIM's site. It's webaim.org. And it has lots of resources and articles that can help you create and improve your digital media with web accessibility in mind. So that's the first place that I would look for this type of example. And the second place that I would look, it's perhaps a little bit more technical, but I would look at the W3C's website. That's w3.org/WAI, and that stands for their Web Accessibility Initiative. W3C is sort of the governing body of standards for the web, for the internet. So, but they have a whole, program that's just dedicated to this one topic. So again, that URL is w3.org/WAI. So those are the two references or two resources that I would recommend starting with. Pete, do you know of any others that might be useful in this case, or did I hit them?
Yeah, sure. I don't think I can share anyone or any other team's newsletters with anyone, but I always recommend people, because I love email marketing. That's my past as well as accessibility. So I like accessibility in email marketing, and it's very important. If you are comfortable with it, you can enable a screen reader either on your Android phone or your iPhone, or even using Chrome Vox or VoiceOver on a Mac, and go through your own newsletter or go through a newsletter that was sent to you, and you can really experience what people will experience when they get this, and that'll kind of open your eyes onto, okay, well, this is how we can make things better, or this is a good one. In addition to that too, a lot of the email marketing providers out there have a ton of reference material on how to make your newsletters better. I'm not sure if I'm able to reference other companies. Am I?
Without endorsing them, you could say, for example.
Okay. So, for example, if you were to, Google, email marketing accessibility or accessibility email marketing, you'll get a number of references from companies such as, Salesforce, Return Path, Email on Acid, and Marketo as well. They all have, really good articles that give you some general, information on stuff that we covered, such as justified fonts, such as, contrast colors and alt text, but it's all really good information out there.
Yeah, so no matter what email platform you end up using, the tips that you will get from these various providers can be applied to whatever email marketing campaign you send out, as well as just emails that you send, without using an email marketing platform as well. If you're sending an email to a team or to a group of people, you could try to apply those principles there as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a question from Pat. They asked, is there an analytic insight to identify how many people are using accessibility technology when they visit their website or social media platform?
Pete?
So I don't believe so. And that's because it is really private information. It's health related information. And, that's why we do share those statistics. About 15% of the global population. And again, any number of us could have a situational, disability or temporary disability. So that's why we want to build for everyone and ensure that we're getting every user the best possible experience.
Great. We have another question from Jen. They said, what are some colors we should avoid when considering colorblind people?
Well, it's the red and the green primarily, right, Pete? So you've got, because those are the two colors that typically people with color blindness have difficulty discerning. When we talked about all of the different things that you can do, one thing to do is to try to avoid an association with a color. You can use some of those other techniques like the patterns in the text. You can use alt text. You can clearly describe what it is that the message that you're trying to convey, rather than just having a visual representation of the ultimately of the content that you're trying to present. I'm actually going to reference, I don't even know if you would bring this up, because I saw a question that came in earlier. We can see a list, and she's helping moderate. And somebody asked me, why am I not reading aloud every slide on a presentation that is about accessibility? And that really jumped out to me, because that is a really valid question. Why did I not read every word on every slide today? And I guess the long answer to that is it kind of goes back to our discussion about alt text. Is there something on the slide that is not going to be conveyed in what I am saying? And one of the things that I did my best, and everyone can always improve, that I tried to do is I tried to verbally convey all of the information that was also visually presented in the words and the images that we saw on the slides. And it is truly a bit of a judgment call. And you have to decide, is that information, is there something here that I need to read aloud that's not going to be in the words that I would speak? So I think that's my long answer to that. Pete, do you have any other tips or insight around that?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, fantastic answer. I would say for the colors, it is sometimes hard for people to say, well, we have to avoid this color. And working with your UX team, that's going to be hard to decide. So the most important thing is that you convey, as you said, convey critical information in two ways, not just color, but you have other information that somebody who wouldn't be able to see the color can still get that content and still get that information. And then in regards to the presentation, I work a lot with screen reader users. And so what I usually try to do is I try to share slides ahead of time so that they have time to go through the slides and review them. But again, it's a judgment call. I try to go through and speak about what is the most critical information. I don't necessarily need to describe everything on the slide, because some of it is decorative or some of it is going to be mentioned down the road or in another slide, and I don't want to repeat myself.
Awesome. We do have another question from Varsha. They said, how do you add the punctuation in the appropriate places while using the voice to text?
I'm going to pass this one to Pete, because you'll have a little bit more experience than me on this one.
I actually don't. So I don't, but
we can look it up.
Yes, yes.
I mean, honestly, I believe the answer is going to be just punctuate as you would. I mean, you are creating a document and writing it, so at the end of a sentence, that's where you put your period at the end of that sentence. So
I was able to find it. You can use different phrases to add punctuation to your text, but please keep in mind punctuation may not be available in every language. So what you would do is be speaking and say period, or be speaking and say comma or question mark, and that would then add that punctuation.
All right, thank you. Mohammed asks, what resource and learning materials does Google have to help build voice search for businesses? And who wants to target consumers with the need to accessibility help?
You go, Pete.
I apologize. Could you, I missed that question. Could you repeat that?
Oh, yeah, sorry. They said, what resource and learning material does Google have to help build voice search for businesses? Specifically, someone who wants to target consumers with need accessibility help.
That's the one I can follow up with and get back to you on that one. A little outside of my experience, but I can definitely look up and find an answer.
Okay, awesome. And another question from Jen. They said, is the alt text part of the ADA compliance? Does the compliance software automatically provide this for our website, or do we have to manually add the captions?
Okay, so alt text is actually part of the HTML code of your pages. And it depends on how you are creating those pages. If you're using a content management system, there is often a field in the system that allows you to put in that alt text for that image. So that's one thing that you can do. I'm not sure if it's an ADA rule, but I know it is a W3C, Web Wide Consortium. Basically, if you're going to have properly coded HTML pages, your images need to have an alt text. I didn't know this, and I learned it when I was researching for this presentation. Even for a decorative image where you're not going to put a description, you would still use that alt attribute, but you would actually leave it blank on the inside. And I didn't know that for proper HTML. That is different than a caption. Again, the caption is that visibly present text that's associated on the web page with that image, and you can have both. Now, if I've missed a nuance of that question, Pete, can you come in and be my wingman? What did I miss?
No, I think you answered it perfectly. Alt text is a test that WCAG 2.0 does want web developers to test for, to include, and that is a big criteria. Whether it ties directly to ADA Section 508. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but for sure, WCAG 2.0, it is a big test and one that a lot of times people do miss. And so if you do start working well with alt text, know how to add decorative alt text so screen readers skip over it, or add captions, you're really doing well for your website and your users.
And Pete, can you clarify? I did not know how to pronounce that acronym. So are you saying WCAG?
Yeah, that's WCAG. That's how I've heard it.
Yep. So that is, and that stands for the web. All right, tell me again. I know it's all the time.
Yeah, WCAG stands for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It's a group of
content accessibility guidelines.
It's a group of volunteers.
I just call it WCAG, but.
But yeah, it's a great group that gets together, and they provide guidelines and assistance and information and how to actually build for a lot of those tests. They give a ton of information. They just don't say add alt text. They teach you, they show you, they have a lot of resources.
Awesome. We do have another question from PJ. They said, is using alt text on multiple of the same types of images, for example, selling cat toys, would they conflict with each other for SEO?
So I'm trying to find the question. Could you repeat it one more time? Sorry.
Sorry. They said, is using alt text on multiple, I'm assuming they mean on multiple of the same type of images. And they said, for example, selling cat toys, would that conflict each other with selling SEO? So I guess two of the same images.
Yeah, there's a lot of the times people do have concerns like, well, this image repeats itself. It does have critical information. Should we add the alt text? And you should. If it provides critical information, you also never know when somebody may enter at what point of your web page. A lot of people will navigate via headers. They may jump down to a section and they say, I really want to read more about this header. So they're going to flip from navigating via headers to navigating by default, go through line by line. And they may enter your website or your web page in a different location than you expect. And so you don't want to have them miss out on an image just because it's been repeated up above or down below. And so it's really important that if your images contain critical information, that you include that alt text.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we have another question from Mohammed. They said, I don't know if this has already been answered. What tools does Google provide to help build voice commerce, just to use the voice search as an assisted technology?
I think that's the one we were going to get back to them on.
That's what I thought.
Right.
Okay.
We're not ignoring you. We're going to get back to you, though.
Okay, sorry about that. Sean has a question, and they said, would green with a check mark be an example of something that could work?
So it depends. If it's just a truly decorative element, then it doesn't really matter. However, if you are a person with a visual impairment, then you need to have something there to help the screen reader understand that. Let's just assume it's a yes, that's what you're trying to say, like, okay. So you would need to have the alt text or the caption associated with that image to help the user understand what it was trying to convey with that screen reader technology. But then we already talked about, well, what if you're colorblind and you may not be using a screen reader, but if you had a green arrow, if you were using green and red, then that wouldn't work, right? Because you wouldn't necessarily be able to discern between those two colors. So I think it's a long way. It depends on what you're trying to communicate with a green check mark. Does that make sense? Pete, anything else to clarify on that?
No, it's exactly. There's a lot of times where we'll have green check marks, red X's, but it's, and if that's conveying critical information, let's say you write a line of code and your product has a red circle with an X in it, or it'll have a green circle with a check mark in it. You've provided two ways for this information to be visually associated. So you want to make sure first that check in that green circle, the contrast is good. You want to check that contrast, make sure that contrast is 4.5 to 1, depending on the size. But you've provided two ways to see it. So if somebody may not be able to see, let's say, the green check, but they get the green background, but they can see a black check mark or a red check mark or something, that's important. Also including, as you said, the alt text, making sure that non-visual users are able to also navigate and put their focus box over that and get that information. A lot of times people will also say, well, I don't want to change the color, so what I'm going to do is add something like a shadow or something like that. But really, at the end of the day, imagine yourself not being able to see certain colors, and you'll be able to improve your product that way.
Awesome. That was great information. Thank you both. Those were all the questions that we had time for in this session. I'd like to thank you all for attending this webinar and give a special thanks to Anastasia Kudrez for presenting today and for Google for sponsoring this session. We hope you'll continue to enjoy the virtual summit networking with the other business owners in the networking lounge, visiting sponsors and partners in the exhibit hall, and picking up free business resources, connecting with SCORE expert mentors in the mentor hall to assist you with your business questions. Thank you all, and I will see you all in the next session.